Hello, I'm Pastor Rob, and this is Pastor Rob Presents Fun with Flagons. A recap, in case you haven't watched yet, this is my new semi-regular series here at Emmanuel Lutheran Church on the different items we use in worship to better explain what they are, what the actual name of it means, as well as what it's used for in the church. Last time I talked about the censer, which is used for incense. Today I'm actually going to get to a topic I had promised in that first episode, and that's going to be talking about what a flagon is. We're going to get into what that is, along with all the other sacred vessels that we use for Holy Communion. Today's just going to be just the actual vessels, not the linens that go with them. That's a whole nother discussion when we talk about sacred linens. But stick around, and today we're going to learn about the sacred vessels we use for Holy Communion on Fun with Flagons. Welcome back. Glad you stuck around with us. So, we are currently in the sacristy here at Emmanuel Lutheran Church. In case you don't know what that means, what the word sacristy means, it's a room in the church where the priest or pastor will prepare things for worship. And also it's the same room where things like the sacred vessels, vestments, paraments, anything else like that that's used in church is kept. And so we're here in the sacristy. And actually, the word for the person who maintains the sacristy, who's not the pastor, is called a sacristan. Not a very common word used anymore. A lot of larger Catholic churches will have a designated sacristan. Seminaries still have sacristans. They're usually students that are beyond their first year. I was a sacristan for my second year, along with two other of my classmates. And so we prepared worship, maintained all the things that were used for worship, cleaned the communion ware, cleaned the linens, things like that. So we are here in the sacristy because this is where all the stuff is kept. Now, I told you that the name of this show is Fun with Flagons. However, we actually don't have a flagon here at the church. I looked all through the sacristy here, and we don't have a flagon. What a flagon is, it's a large metal pitcher, usually with a hinged lid, that's used to keep communion wine during worship. And they'd be used if there's a chalice being used for communion, the wine would be poured into the chalice from a flagon. We don't have one here because we don't actually use one for worship. That might change in the future, who knows? But we don't actually have a flagon. We have something similar though, and it's this. It's called a cruet. So a cruet is a glass pitcher with a stopper lid on it, and this can be used also for communion wine. Also to keep holy water for any kind of needs that you have for that, or anointing oil. So these serve multiple purposes. I had mentioned chalices for communion. This is a chalice. It's a metal drinking vessel of sorts. It's got the bowl part on top here. It's got a stem with a base, and what makes it distinctive is most communion chalices have this little knob part in the middle here. Don't ask me why. I probably knew at one point, but I currently don't know offhand. But most communion chalices have that shape. Now, churches can have up to 3 different styles of chalices at one time. There's usually a very ornate gold-plated one used on the altar. Then there is a chalice that's just silver plate like this with a completely round edge. That's used for Tinction, which is when you take the wafer or bread and you dunk it into the wine or grape juice. Or if it's common cup where you drink the wine. Now, however, common cup is becoming less and less used nowadays because of the pandemic. And I don't blame people, because the idea of drinking out of the same cup can seem a little off-putting. One way to get around that is churches can use a fortified wine like port or any other kind of fortified wine, because that has a higher alcohol content, which will then kill the bacteria. Also, even in Tinction is kind of going a little bit out of style because of the pandemic, because you're putting your hand in, you're dunking your wine or wafer, your bread or wafer into the wine, and your finger might end up in the wine. So that also causes some concerns. This kind of chalice, however, this is the last style. It's called a pouring chalice. You see, there's a little spout here, and it's for pouring. Many churches will use, especially now, will use the little individual cups that have wine in it. And there's two ways of going about having those cups. You can either do it like what we do here in Emmanuel, where we have someone pre-fill those cups before service, and so we have just a tray of cups with the wine already in it. Or some churches, you get an empty cup as you come forward, and someone will then take the chalice and pour the wine into it. Now, let me tell you, that is my least favorite version, because I've been the assisting minister who has had to pour the wine, and if my hands are shaking or your hands are shaking with a little teeny tiny cup, it takes a very small target space and moves it all over the place. So spillage is very common with that. We just use our pouring chalice as the chalice on the altar for blessing communion. Moving on, we have this. This is called a paten. It is used to hold the bread of the wafers. It's basically a plate. This is the one used on the altar to hold the large host wafer, which is about this size. There can be larger ones to hold more bread or wafers. In fact, we kind of sort of use one. This right here is an aluminum tray. Normally it would hold those aforementioned communion cups. There'd be a grate in here with holes to put the cups in. But we've sort of repurposed this as a large paten. We'll put the cut up communion bread in here, and so I'll hold it like this. So that's a paten. Now, we get into something a little bit interesting. This is a combination paten and chalice. As you can see, there's the chalice in the middle here that comes out, and there's the paten here. So what this would be is if I was doing communion by myself, if there was nobody to assist me, I could put wafers in here, I can hand the wafer to the person, and then they intinct it themselves, or I would take the wafer, intinct it for them, and then hand it to them. A lot of older churches will do that, especially Catholics, and what they do is the priest or pastor actually will put the wafer in the person's mouth. Again, sanitary issues with that nowadays, so it's kind of fallen out of favor. But the idea of being able to hand the person a wafer and then they intinct it makes it an all-in-one experience. We have a few of these at the church. I've seen others where they have the chalice sort of offset. It's kind of a cool idea, especially for services that are going to be smaller crowds, or if you have a hard time trying to find people to help with worship. This is definitely useful. That takes us to our last two items we have for communion stuff, and it's actually what holds the wafers of the bread. This is called a saborium. As you notice, it's shaped like a chalice. If you take the lid off, it actually could be used as a chalice. The saborium holds the wafers. In fact, I actually have some in here right now. I use these for funerals. This particular saborium is actually my own personal one. It's got it's got a close story to me. If you look closely at it, I clearly can't show you in video, but if you look at the base of it, engraved on it, it says, "In loving memory of Robert W. Eller." Now, you'll notice my name is also Robert Eller. That's actually my grandfather. My parents bought this from my home congregation in memory of my grandfather after he had passed, and last year when I got ordained, my home church actually gifted it to me to be able to use here. So it holds wafers. It's got the same shape as a chalice. Now, there's another thing that can hold wafers. This right here. Now, you might think this is a saborium. It's actually not. It's got a rather mundane name. It's just called a host box. Host meaning the wafer. And you just put them in there. They can be called a stemless saborium, but typically they're called host boxes. Communion ware can come in a variety of shapes, sizes, finishes, materials, platings. As you can see, these two items here are brass plated, whereas these two are silver plated. well, and then gold plated interior, but silver plated. You can also get stoneware, communionware, made from with ceramic. Those are pretty popular. In my office, I have a blown glass chalice from the Holy Land. A friend of mine bought it for me when they went on a trip there. So you can have them in various shapes and sizes and finishes. But this right here is just a general overview of sacred vessels we use in communion. So if next time you're in church, pay attention, see what's being used, see what it looks like, see what method of communion you do. If you do the little individual cups, if you do the chalices, if you do real bread or wafers, we actually do both here for people who have a preference of one way or the other. Mostly bread, but we do have wafers available. But that's just a general overview for you of what we do for communion here at church. This has been Pastor Rob Presents Fun with Flagons. Have a good day.